Hello, and welcome to our Impact with Aegis series for August 2023. Our topic today is group, concurrent, or individual, how to navigate the choice. Presenting today, we have Kristen Tischer. She's a PT and DOR. Amy Rhodes, who is a PTA and DOR. And then myself, Melissa Deeker. I'm an OT and DOR, and all of us are with Aegis Therapies. So we all work for Aegis Therapies. There are no other relevant financial or non-financial relationships to disclose. Just some opening housekeeping. This is some very important information for everyone. All lines are on mute. If you're sharing your screen with a participant who did not register for the event who still wants to receive CE credit, please share the name and email of that participant in the questions feature. The brochure and handout are available as attachments in your banner, and the presentation will take about an hour, and the speakers will be available after for questions and an answer session. Certificates will be emailed to you after the course is completed within 1 to 2 weeks. And then just a reminder, the questions, if you have any, will go in the question box to be addressed by the speakers at the end of the presentation. Our objectives for today. So at the conclusion of the event, everyone will be able to explain the differences among individual, group, and concurrent service delivery methods, distinguish billing differences for group and concurrent scenarios with different payer sources, and outline the unique elements that different service delivery methods provide to a patient. Shiloh, we're ready for polling question number 1, please. All right, if each of you would go ahead and indicate how long you've been practicing in the skilled nursing environment. All right. We just wanted to get an idea of who, how many years our participants have been serving or practicing in the skilled nursing environment. So thank you. Why group? So group is not anything new to us. In the real world, we spend a great amount of time in group settings. So whether it's with our family, leisure tasks with friends, or even community activities. Many of our patients would like to return back to these very similar group activities. So I want you to think about a resident you've had recently who maybe has dealt with a difficult or new diagnosis, loss of a loved one, faced with having less support at home, and they're just new to this whole skilled nursing short stay. They often feel like things are out of control. So the patient that comes to mind for me was at my building recently. He had recently lost his wife, began struggling at home, falling a lot, ended up with a hip fracture. So then he came to our skilled nursing facility for rehab, and he was the perfect one to choose for my fall prevention group. So I went into his room. I let him know he was invited to our fall prevention class, told him the benefits of it. He was very hesitant to go. However, he decided he'd come and try it, see what it was like. Once he got there, it was so just great to see him engage with everyone around him, interacting and talking about how many falls he's had at home, how it's impacted his life, and really just wanting to learn more about how he can get back home and prevent falls in the future. He took that information he learned that day back to his family, and they were able to set things up at home to allow him to return home. But another great thing after all of that, he not only got to return home, but that same day, he was stayed after our class, and he sat there and spoke, I kid you not, for an hour with another resident and he was no longer, stuck in his room, feeling down. And so this is just one of the many positive group interactions I have been able to be a part of. So definitions. We all know what individual treatment is. It's one-on-one, the therapist and the patient. All payers are included in this. It's a minimum of 75% of the total therapy minutes for Part A stay. Documentation must support this skilled treatment. So no matter whether it's individual, group, or concurrent service delivery method, we must always make sure it is goal-directed, tied to the individual patient's short-term and long-term goals. And something to remember for documentation is that if you didn't measure it, you shouldn't treat it. It must be measured and have an identified functional deficits and underlying impairments. And once again, must be skilled, medically reasonable, and necessary. We highly recommend if you have starter phrases in your documentation system, if that's available, to use that to help guide you and make sure you're including everything. Group treatment, that's simultaneous treatment of 2 to 6 patients performing the same or similar activity. Who can participate? Med A-like, this is your planned groups. And then Med B is a little different. Its definition for group is it can be same or similar, or it could be different, but it's still simultaneously with another patient or patients. So combined with concurrent minutes cannot exceed 25% of the total therapy minutes for Part A stay. And once again, documentation must support this skilled treatment. So for group, therapists must be aware of the current goals for each patient. Documentation included is dependent on the payer. So for Part A or Part A-like, state the number, the type of group the patient participated in, the number of participants, impairments or function the group is intended to improve, and the benefits of that group. For Part B, must include number of patients and the treatment intervention used to facilitate the patient's individual plan of care. Just a reminder, socialization is not supported as appropriate to benefit a group or concurrent, unless it is a current goal for that patient. Lastly, we have concurrent treatment. So it's a treatment of 2 patients at the same time, completing different activities. Who can participate? This would include your skilled payers, Med A-like, and when it's combined with group minutes, cannot exceed the 25% of total therapy minutes for Part A stay. And yes, documentation must support that skilled treatment. So for Part A-like, documentation should include the concurrent treatment that was provided for each CPT code, provide the benefit of this service delivery, and treatment interventions must be provided. So the decision to use group and concurrent or individual is a clinical decision by the therapist, and it's based, once again, on the patient's individual needs. So here's a few examples of what a concurrent treatment session might look like. So once again, it's 2 patients that are being treated, but they're completing different activities at the same time. So an example for physical therapy would be the physical therapist starts 1 patient on therapeutic exercise, then is providing gait training with another patient while supervising and cueing the first patient. An occupational therapist starts 1 patient with therapeutic exercise, then provides self-care adaptive equipment training while supervising and cueing the first patient. And another example would be for speech therapists, starting with 1 patient with a memory activity, then begins liquid swallow strategy with the second patient while supervising and cueing the patient completing the memory tasks. So now Amy's gonna lead you in the next polling question.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, Shiloh, we are ready for polling question number 2. And that question is, currently, how often do you perform group treatment? Once a week, twice a week, every chance I get, once a month, rarely, or never? Okay, thank you, Shiloh. We will move on to the next slide. Okay, group billing scenario. We have one discipline with a 6-patient group. The CODA is performing the group with these 6 patients. The total time spent in the group is 30 minutes. Each patient is billed for a 30-minute group. So our group therapy CPT code is 97150 for all payer sources, Med A and Med B. For speech services, if this was a speech therapist, if they are treating group for speech and swallowing, their CPT code would be 92508. But please note that some MACs, the Medicare Administrative Local Coverage Determination, requires group dysphagia treatment to be billed under the 97150, just as it is for PT and OT. And all of these are service-based codes, so only a quantity of one can be assigned. For the 3 Med A patients, this note would include Part A group is the situation where the participants are completing the same or similar activities. So the documentation would include, again, the impairments, the functions being addressed in the group that relate to each participant's goal. And the impairments, functions mentioned must have documented measures to show the problem and the extent of the problem being treated. Report the benefit of the group and report the number in the group. For those 3 Part B patients, they would still also be billed 30 minutes, one quantity under the 97150. But because Part B group can have participants doing same or similar activities, or they could be doing different activities, the documentation expectations are different. In addition, while CMS has given details about what they expect for a Part A group documentation, they didn't go into as much detail for Part B group documentation. So we report on the interventions provided in the group that relate to the patient's current goals and documented measured impairments and deficits, and report the number in group. We will move on to the next slide of group or concurrent. Okay, so our scenario 1, we have one discipline with 2 patients working together. In the first image, we have a Part B and a Med A patient. These 2 patients are billed for 30 minutes, but a different activity. So for billing a Medicare Part B, concurrent is not a service delivery option for Part B or Part B-like patients. Any such overlapped skilled treatment minutes delivered to Part B or Part B-like patients would be group therapy and billed using that service code, group CPT code, billing those 30 minutes. The Med A, however, can be billed under concurrent, indicating that concurrent treatment was provided and the exact number of minutes. Describe the treatment interventions for each CPT code provided concurrently and document the intervention was part of a concurrent session. Report the benefit of the concurrent session. Our second scenario is 2 Med A's billed as concurrent for 30 minutes, perform different activities. We will then just indicate a concurrent treatment was provided, the exact number of minutes, the benefit of the service delivery option, and the treatment interventions provided in the concurrent mode. So we would describe the concurrent treatment interventions for each CPT code provided concurrently and document that intervention was part of a concurrent session and report the benefit, again, of the concurrent session. Our next slide, overcoming barriers to implementing group. This, I think, was a big barrier for all of us, is scheduling the group time with the facility. Do we post schedules, make appointment cards for residents? Scheduling back-to-back or overlapping sessions for concurrent is a great barrier to overcome. Multidisciplinary communication, hand off patients from one discipline to another consistent group days, or pre-planned activities. Determine at the time of eval what group activities the patient can benefit from or concurrent treatment. Care team communication. Utilize different areas of the facility for group activities or use of extenders, rehab techs, energy, and activities. Also, if you possibly have space limitations, searching out an area that may be available with the facility approval or implementing smaller groups. Meeting with your staff to discuss all of these potential barriers with specific patients to determine a possible resolution utilizing each other's ideas. Transportation can also be an issue to and from the gym. This again is a multidisciplinary communication and teamwork. If you have a unique challenge, please put in the chat and we can go through this during the questions and answers. Okay, Melissa.
All right, so I'm excited to tell you a little bit about my building and how we've overcome challenges with providing group and concurrent, and then the success that we have had. So I'm a director of a building that can hold roughly 108 census, skilled nursing facility. We also have energy, which is our wellness team. So thinking back to this, it was a little bit difficult remembering in the beginning the challenge that we've had, because my team has been very consistent with group and concurrent, providing those services to our service mode of delivery for our patients. I know initially when we started, I took on the role of mentoring that, being a role model for my team, leading the way with completing a group every week. So that allowed me time to sit down with my team. I could see the barriers, nursing, struggling with helping us get patients up, not understanding, the timeliness of helping us get our patients to the group, the consistency, figuring out that communication process. How do we choose the right patients for our group? All of that. So what I have learned through all of this was that communication and consistency have been the key. My team, they all know their scheduled group days. We typically do like OT and PT back to back. That way it lessens transport time. We have consistent days, so nursing knows, hey, I know they're going to be coming to me with our group patients they would like to have up by 10:30, ready to go. It increases our patients up and about every day. And then we at times will schedule them around our wellness energy activity classes too. So we just decrease that transportation time. So besides seeing the impact on our patients, we have also felt a positive impact. Say we're short-staffed, or we had a call-in, or someone's on a leave of absence. I know everyone has felt a time where we're maybe heavy more on physical therapy or therapists versus OT. And so those days we can still provide the same number of minutes to our patients. It might just look a little different. It might be in a group, or it might be a concurrent session. So it allows us to not lessen those treatments and still provide the minutes that our patients benefit from. We've also had, which I'm sure a lot of you have had, payers that their reimbursement dictates pretty much how many minutes we can provide. So that has been nice, that if you put them, choose a group that is appropriate for them and meets their goals one time a week per discipline, that allows you to provide more minutes, or concurrent. Yes, so I have found that consistency has been huge for my team. Communication has been huge with our nursing staff, with our patients, letting them know they're invited to this class. It's very important for a part of their rehab stay to be a part of this class that they were chosen for. And there is just great satisfaction watching your patients interacting together and sharing just different strategies they've used, or seeing that moment when they realize, oh, that's what I need to do to get up to stand, or I need to transfer better. That's what I need to do, watching them and encouraging each other. So I hope that each of you have a time or moment where you just have that smile on your face as you're seeing your patients benefit from these different service delivery methods in your building. Now Kristen's gonna explain how group and concurrent has impacted her building.
Good afternoon. So my name is Kristen. I am a PT by background and a director of rehab up in Northeast South Dakota. I have 4 skilled nursing facilities, 1 large skilled nursing combined with assisted living and independent living, as well as outpatient, and then 3 energy contracts, or where we contract in and provide the restorative care in 3 different of my buildings. When we started discussing group and concurrent, and we all remember kind of the freedom that we had with treatment before COVID. And then COVID comes in and you're treating everybody in their rooms. Treatments were hard, you're very one-on-one. And the aha moment for me in seeing that optimal benefit of group was when we started to emerge from isolation and COVID, and we were allowed to start doing some group and concurrent again. I remember doing probably my first or second group or concurrent treatment, and just seeing the joy, the pure joy on your residents' faces when they got to have that ability to interact with somebody else, another patient, another resident in the same room, versus they're always in their room and they're always by themselves. And it was just such a pure moment of joy for me as a therapist and for them as a resident. It was really that sell for me on how beneficial group and concurrent can be for your patients, to motivate them and use that as an adjunct treatment with your traditional individual treatments. We all, as Melissa highlighted, we all have those times and those periods of time when we struggle a little bit with our staffing. How many therapists we might have in the building on any given day. My facilities are very spread out, and we do share quite a bit of staff. And so group and concurrent are really critical for us, so that we can have that extra treatment time, that extra ability to really impact our patients with the interventions that we are providing. And it allows us more time with the patient. It allows us a little bit more time to really target some of those items that we want to hit. One of the biggest challenges that we do have, I would say, is scheduling and transport. Partnering with our restorative and energy teams in those buildings has made a big difference in terms of handing off. The patient may have been doing some of their restorative programming, and we're handing them off to PT or vice versa, and just really becoming partners in terms of finding that end game for the residents' goals, and getting them to that point where they are reaching their goals. Transportation time, same thing, always a challenge in a little bit of a larger facility. The handoff has really helped. And scheduling, getting your facility on board with helping you schedule and follow through with that. I know sometimes it can be a little bit hard when, maybe the resident isn't up, or, the facility knows, oh, hey, we have group that day, but the facility maybe struggles a little bit with their staffing too. And so one thing that's been very beneficial for us is to have lots of options in terms of who, choosing who's appropriate for those groups on any given day. And that's really benefited my teams overall, in just knowing that we have some different options of people to put together. We really lean on group and concurrent in every facility of mine to really drive our care and helping our residents meet all of their goals. So now Amy's going to talk a little bit about how group
Okay.
and concurrent impacts her buildings.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello to all. I'm Amy Rose, Director of Rehab for a long-term care facility in Northern Indiana. I have been a clinician within long-term care for the past 23 years. During my first few years as a clinician, group therapy service delivery was much different then and than how we actually manage and deliver today. So back before 2010, group service delivery was like a 1 day a week on a Friday, and it included the majority of our caseload and involved all disciplines. But by 2010, CMS started implementing definitions and changes of group services. Then in 2011, they made a significant definition change by CMS of group, in which it stated to requiring 4 participants in a structured, planned program and introduced the concept of reimbursable therapy minutes, dividing the group minutes by 4 as it pertains to the therapy minutes for the RUGs allocation. Having exactly 4 patients that have similar needs and are available at the exact same time for a planned ahead group made providing group very difficult. So as of 2011 until now, ultimately, none of us were doing group service delivery. So here we are now with a new definition implemented due to PDPM because we no longer have the RUG system. So the majority of my therapy team also went through these changing times. Yet going almost 10 years without group service delivery, which they had done in the past, one would think this should be easy to get my team up and running again with group and concurrent. It just was not as easy as I thought. As a team, we did work together, and as their leader, I helped break down the barriers. Some clinicians' barriers, they forgot the value and the benefits of group. As we came out of the pandemic, this barrier was resolved quickly. As we began trying small groups, patients began demonstrating the value to the clinicians quickly. Our patients were out of isolation. They quickly began supporting each other during activities, and the feeling of achievement was tremendous. So we broke the buy-in barriers with the clinician. Now came the time for the logistics of keeping group and concurrent delivery consistent. So planning and scheduling needed to be as precise as possible. I am a true believer in utilizing the planner and creating templates within projections that fit each payer source's service delivery model. Having this planned on the staff schedule helps ensure delivery and or communication as to why concurrent and or group was not achievable. My staff are fully supported by me, and they understand each day if they cannot deliver what is scheduled, we will figure it out why and how and ensure they can the next time. Communication and understanding of your patients, clinical needs and goals are key to successful outcomes for us all. Having that communication with your team and having that understanding and that support behind your team that you want them to achieve what the patient requires, but if it doesn't happen that day, they are going to buy in completing the group and concurrent treatment. We also, at some point, did find that our patients were needing to stay engaged while on a rest break during a group treatment session. So we started playing a game, which was a very fun moment for us. My team started playing this trivia game right before I had to leave for morning meeting. The game was called I Should Have Known That. So it's just a question and the answer about things you ought to know. So by the time I had gotten back from morning meeting, it seemed like my little small groups of PT, OT, and speech all became one huge group. And you could hear the laughter coming down the hallway. So providing these services, adding that little extra will surely make a difference to everyone, our patients, our staff, and us. Thank you. Okay, Shiloh, we're ready for polling question 3. What is the maximum number of patients that can participate in a group therapy task? We are collecting responses. We'll give it a few more minutes, a few more seconds. We're at about 70%. Okay. 63% have it correct at 6. That is how the maximum number of patients that can participate in a group is 6. Thank you. Kristen?
Great, Shiloh, we are ready for polling question number 4. What would you say is the biggest barrier to providing different modes of treatment into your therapy sessions? Give it just another couple seconds here. Okay, so it looks like about 31% of you facility support is the biggest barrier. 28% are coming in around time to plan group. 23% indicated that patient demographics are the biggest barrier. So kind of a spread there between multiple different areas where we feel like there are barriers, all things that all of us have experienced. All right, so Shiloh, we're ready for polling scenario number 5. So this is a group billing question. There are 4 patients participating in a group activity. 2 of them are Med A and 2 of them are Med B. The time spent in the group is 40 minutes for all the folks. If all patients participated fully, what do we bill for Bob? Okay, we'll give it just a couple of seconds. All right. So the correct answer is that Bob participated in the full amount of the group, and so 40 minutes. Okay. Okay, so there is polling scenario number 6 here. There are 4 patients participating in a group activity. 2 of them are Med A and 2 of them are Med B. The total time that the therapist spent in the group is 50 minutes. Lucille came to the group late by 10 minutes and Hazel left early by 5 minutes. What do we bill for Lucille? Okay, we'll give it just another couple seconds. All right. So about 55% answered A, 40 minutes. And that is correct because she came to the group late by 10 minutes. So you can only bill for the amount of group time she actually participated in the group. Remember that even if they're Med A and they're Med B, both of them can count as group. This is a group scenario, not a concurrent scenario. So remember that if it was only part A's, that would be a situation where you would bill concurrent, and that would be 2 part A's. If it's 2 part A's and 2 part B's, group can be billed for all of them. Okay. So one of the really wonderful things about group is the sky is really the limit in terms of creativity. We've got a bunch of group ideas here, things that have worked really well for all of us and some of our coworkers and peers in the past. Things like a walkathon can correlate to gait training and dynamic balance. We've had some really great wheelchair mobility groups, particularly for OT, working on them coaching each other through locking and unlocking the brakes, self-propelling, if they're working on endurance, propelling together, working on those safety scenarios where they're able to help one another. And it's not always coming from you as the clinician in terms of the cues. PT and OT both can utilize things like transfer training groups, dynamic trunk exercises, throwing, ball kicking. Speech, there's quite a few opportunities for speech therapists in terms of group, things like meal prep, setting up the table for a meal, lunch, dinner, using the placemat template. There's a lot of different activities that we can get multidisciplinary involvement, things like gardening. You can have, OT working on some of the fine motor, speech perhaps working on some of the cognitive and the sequencing piece of things. PT, they can be standing, working on endurance and balance. Some other areas of opportunity here, PT working on dynamic balance, games, things like basketball. I remember during March Madness, we did a lot of basketball groups in one of my buildings. It was a lot of fun, kind of having some of the basketball games on, getting people working on some dynamic balance and coordination and standing, modified mini golf, things like cornhole. That's always a really popular game for balance, upper extremity reaching, things like that. OT, lots and lots of feedback I've gotten on use of adaptive equipment and things like learning how to use the sock aid, learning how to use a reacher. Sometimes things just work a lot better when another resident can work with someone who's having the same types of issues, the same types of deficits. They can work together. There's that mirroring, the visual cues that they can give one another just by practicing the task. And a lot of times you'll get quite a bit of correction where they're helping one another out versus the cues always relying, coming from you as a therapist. PT and OT in one of my buildings, they do this like yearly carnival kind of right around the time of the fair. And that's coming up again for us. And they set up a lot of games and things like that. We have gone as far as getting involved in putting some groups together that surround some of these carnival type games where we can work on some things like dexterity or sequencing, balance, having multiple people working on, even setting up the games, breaking them down, working on the sequencing and utilizing cognition and those types of activities to kind of get this well-rounded intervention. Some more group ideas. Everybody loves the summer, but let's be honest, the summer's coming to an end and we're kind of heading into what we call the holiday season. And this is a great time of year, kind of moving into the fall and Thanksgiving and Christmas, tons of opportunity for group activities, lots and lots of creativity that surrounds some of those things. We have done quite a few like themed groups where we're working on decorating, reaching, cookie decorating. That's a great one, come Christmas time, working on groups to bake, get the dough put together, following a recipe. All those types of things are really critical for any type of patient rehab scenario. Dysphagia groups, memory and orientation. You can go as far as like scooting and repositioning. I think one thing that a lot of therapists do kind of rely on in terms of group is we have to have the perfect patient to go in every group. And sometimes I have tried to set a good example for my team and led the way, which now they've taken over, is anybody can really participate in a group intervention as long as they're obviously clinically appropriate and it's appropriate to work towards their goals. Sometimes somebody who's a little bit of maybe perhaps a lower level patient may actually excel in a group because they have that opportunity to watch someone else perform the task, utilize that mirroring, have that opportunity to see someone who's a little bit farther ahead of them in their rehab journey, and it motivates them a little bit more. Sometimes I actually have patients that prefer group and they participate better in their group interventions than sometimes their individual interventions. We've discussed there's a ton of impact that comes from educational classes, taking those into consideration with group. Things that are very diagnosis specific, like orthopedic pain management, energy conservation with regard to COPD, CHF. We mentioned the fall prevention and home safety groups, ADL retraining, AE and AD training, home exercise program groups. We were just discussing this earlier today, just implementing perhaps a group of patients, that are post-operative and they all have very similar home programs, many of them getting ready to go home on their own, looking at increasing their independence and their technique with one another. And then just looking at those transition of care and discharge planning groups. Medication management has always been a really great group idea, really successful there. Same thing, just helping one another. The benefits. So as we've kind of discussed some of the barriers, the obstacles, some ideas, billing, documentation, ultimately our goal is what benefits the patient. There are so many benefits to group and concurrent. This really increases the learning opportunity with a large variety of patients. There's huge opportunity to increase problem solving and cognitive, those cognitive interventions. This is really a shared experience between patients with diagnosis and rehab challenges. Oftentimes, I'll get a group together or a concurrent treatment together, and many of them are asking each other, well, what are you in for? What are you here for? And to hear them discuss with one another and relate, to one another, oh, I had surgery on this, oh, I had surgery on this, and I want to go home, and oh, so do I. And then they start to have that connection, and they're able to connect with one another and motivate each other. I actually had a really wonderful experience recently where I had 2 residents that both were really struggling with their rehab. One just really undermotivated, and one was almost over motivated. And, in terms of precautions, we couldn't advance far enough, and they were getting really discouraged. And I happened to have them in a group together, put them in the group not knowing anything really about either one of their way past histories, get them in the group together, and the 2 of them immediately recognized each other and started having that conversation. What are you in for? What are you in for? And one of them turned to me and said, we went to grade school together and we haven't seen each other in probably 50 years. It was really a wonderful moment. And then they were able to really connect with one another, being in the same facility, a very similar situation, and both of them rehabbed beautifully. And I think sometimes just making that connection and them understanding they're not alone. It's really important, and it really gives you that optimal benefit, not only to group, but really for them reaching their goals. And that's what it's about. Just looking at collaborative activities to reduce the discomfort with individual treatment. Some people don't really love the one-on-one, and a lot of times, like I discussed earlier, group treatment will give them a better benefit. They're more, inclined to participate. Reducing social isolation. Some discussion we have had amongst some of our DORs is, coming in and out of COVID, we saw a lot of social isolation. It's really hard when you've been used to being alone and almost understimulated for a very long time. Getting these people into a group setting allows them to feel more comfortable, particularly when they are going to rehab back to the community. Enhancing those coping mechanisms. Same thing, really helps with community reentry and preparing them for those higher level complex situations that they're going to encounter. Increasing their preparedness for community level activity in the home environment. Modeling, big one, and that's something that I discussed previously, in terms of utilizing group to really improve the patient's ability to adjust and adapt to the interventions and also learn. Promoting growth and learning and enabling a really supportive environment for them to achieve their goals. And then ultimately down at the bottom, the thing that I really truly see the most is really increasing participation and motivation. So on the previous polling, we had asked how many of you are practicing group kind of on the regular, and it was only about 44% were not currently completing group. And so I'm hoping that all of you will really see a lot of the benefits that it can have and start to really be able to feel comfortable incorporating group and concurrent into your daily practice, because it really is a huge opportunity to benefit your patients. Just some more benefits. Positive impact on moods, there is supportive evidence to promote the increased engagement and sustainable outcomes, providing a healthy competitive environment. Some of the games, and as she was discussing, like trivia games, things like that, it can get very competitive. I have had situations where it gets kind of loud, and maybe a nurse will come down and say, what are you guys doing in here? And that's wonderful to see everybody's involved, they're enjoying themselves. Improving carryover strategies and providing opportunity for functional communication interactions with their peers. Again, that socialization piece of things is important. It's not necessarily what skills the group, unless that is a goal. So it's really important to remember that. and that you still, even with that socialization piece, you're working towards that skilled goal for the patient. Realistic simulation of a typical daily life. Life outside of the nursing home is busy. Things are complicated. The environments can be more stressful. So creating some of those simulated experiences in a group scenario can allow for improved divided attention and dual tasking with patients that return to the community. Providing a safe environment and support system with peer support. And then, as I started out by saying, really just creativity in your service delivery. So just a little bit of the closing housekeeping before we move on to any of your questions. If you wish to receive ASHA CE credit, please download the ASHA participant form and fill it out and return it to Shiloh by the 23rd of August. Reminder to provide the name and email of any participant who may be sharing your screen in the chat box so that we can record the attendance if they wish to receive the CE credit. And your certificates will be emailed within 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, so just before we start the question and answer session, the handouts, there should be a panel on your screen that has the handouts section. You'll just have to click the triangle and then the handouts will, the available handouts will drop down and you'll have to download those. And then we have a couple of questions. The first one is, can you do group with Part A and a Part B patient at the same time?
Yes, the answer is yes. I don't know, Kristen, if you want to go back to that slide, but just things to remember for Part A. If they are doing the same or similar activity with anywhere from 2 to 6 or 2 to 6 patients total, that would be considered group. Part B is different because you cannot, once again, concurrent is not a service delivery method. However, under the group CPT code, it is defined as same or similar or could be different. It's just at the same time they are being provided that treatment. So yes, you can do a Part A and a Part B at the same time.
Okay. What are some great activities to include all disciplines with group therapy? I noticed that group times may run over into other disciplines and can find ways to transition and include others.
So I find that when we have like an OT group and then a PT group, let's say we had maybe 1 or 2 that are not the same and we're transporting them down or returning someone to the room, I find that a lot of times they are really just carrying on the same topics that we were talking about. Or like Amy mentioned, they were doing a trivia question in between. So I think there's lots of great opportunities there for engagement in that in-between time. Hope that answers that question. I can't see it on my screen, so.
For ST, the CPT code descriptor 92508 does not include dysphagia or cognition. Can you bill 97150 for those, or is it MAC dependent?
Yes, you can bill the 97150, but you will want to look and be sure with your MAC that it is okay to bill that 97150 for speech.
Okay. How do you account for fall and swallowing safety needs if group number is maximum?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
one
great.
more time.
Can you repeat the question, Shiloh?
Oh, It has already gone away because we'll go to the
So I
next
think
one.
the question surrounded safety when you're kind of at that max group number. It's a great question. I know I find setting myself up for success if I am at that very maximal group number. So for myself, I'm a PT. I love balance groups. It's my favorite thing to do. And so just kind of planning the activity around, will I need somebody, who needs the parallel bars? How many people can I put over there? And having a very safe situation. I will sometimes have, maybe two standing at the same time. Sometimes I have the ability to have my rehab tech there and she can help support with the safety piece of things as well, just an extra set of hands. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're choosing an activity where the patient safety is the number one priority. Everyone's got a gait belt on. You're really dividing your attention amongst all of those residents at the same time. If you do choose an activity, let's say that may be a little bit higher level, you just want to really make sure that you have everything put into place for things to be as safe as possible.
Okay. What is the difference encountered by groups conducted by activities versus rehab staff?
So in terms of therapy groups, you're working on looking at their deficits. What are the deficits that are perhaps in common, that are all in common for that particular patient? Let's say it's strength. So while an activities group may be working on generalized strength or range of motion, like in one of my buildings, they have like a little exercise class that they go to in the morning. Our groups are more targeted for those patients, specific, very goal oriented, very specific. Remember that group has to have the ability to be skilled because you're working on something that is goal oriented for the patient. You're really addressing those deficits and impairments to reach the ultimate goal of standing, walking, bathing, dressing. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Is increasing engagement of patient toward goals considered a skilled reasons for group/concurrent?
As long as you can tie it in to some functional measured goal that the patient has. So if they're more engaged and they're actually possibly improving their function because of that engagement, you can tie in the engagement part of the group towards that improvement in that functional ability.
Billing question for concurrent. What if they only overlap, for example, for 30 minutes and remaining 20 minutes individual? What would you bill?
So you're billing, so if you overlap, for example, 30 minutes and remaining. So you're billing your 50 minutes. And I know for us, in the way that we bill, it's under each CPT code. You're still putting what you provided under concurrent under each CPT code. And then your concurrent box is where you put in how many minutes you provided a concurrent treatment. So you would bill your entire minutes, as I spoke on earlier in the documentation piece, and write what you provided. And then the concurrent is more that tying in why it benefited them, how it was pertained towards their goals.
Okay. What about if PTO and CODA do a group together and work on strengthening, and while PT is doing LE strengthening, OT is working on unsupported sitting balance core strengthening? Does this support both OT and PT services?
I would say it does. However, the PT and OT would have to actually split their time. They could not bill the entire time. So if PT and OT work together for 30 minutes, OT could have 15 minutes and PT could have 15 minutes.
How long preparation time that is allowed prior to conducting the group?
I think that's really case dependent on what you plan for your activity to be. Typically, our group time for setup is anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. It depends on what type of activity we're trying to do that day. You know, if we're going to do a cooking task, that's going to take a little bit longer to set up. If we're doing something that's more like a gate group and we're setting up, you know, obstacles or things like that, it's a little bit of an easier setup, a little bit less time.
Okay, we'll take one more. We're out of time, but we'll take one more question. It's do CC minutes need to match between the two?
So if you're referring to the same number of concurrent minutes matching between each patient, yes. The same number of concurrent minutes need to be delivered to each patient if you're overlapping the same two patients, if that is to what we're referring in terms of that question.
Okay, that is all the time we have. I've seen several comments saying they couldn't find the handouts. So if you still were not able to find the handouts after I mentioned how to do it, you can email me. My email is Shiloh, SHYLA, .Hamrick, HAMRICK, @aegistherapies.com. Just let me know what you're needing and I will be happy to get that to you guys. Amy, Kristen, Melissa, do y'all have anything else?
No, thank you everyone for attending. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you everybody. And if you have any questions, our emails are right up here. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.